In June 1912, in a small town in Iowa, an entire family was murdered in their sleep with an axe. The killer never made a sound loud enough to wake a single neighbor. To this day, nobody knows who did it. The town was called Villisca, a quiet farming community of roughly 2,000 residents. The kind of place where most people knew each other by name, where doors were rarely locked, and where a violent crime of any kind was almost unheard of. The Moore family lived in a modest two-story house near the center of town, close enough to neighbors that a scream, under normal circumstances, would likely have been heard. Josiah Moore ran a successful farm implement business in town and was well respected among the local business community. His wife, Sarah, was known throughout Villisca for her work teaching Sunday school at the local Presbyterian church, a role that made her a familiar, well-liked figure to nearly every family in town. Together, they had 4 children: Herman, age 11, Catherine, age 9, Boyd, age 7, and Paul, age 5. By all accounts from neighbors and relatives, the Moore family was unremarkable in the best possible way: hardworking, friendly, and entirely ordinary. On the evening of June 9th, the Moore family attended a children's program at the local Presbyterian church, where Sarah had helped organize the event. 2 young guests, sisters Lena and Ina Stillinger, ages 12 and 8, were invited to stay the night at the Moore house after the program ended, a common and unremarkable arrangement between families in the close-knit town, where children frequently stayed over at friends' homes without any particular planning involved. The family returned home sometime after 10 in the evening, based on witness accounts from neighbors who saw the lights go out in the house around that time. By morning, all 8 people inside that house would be dead. A neighbor, growing concerned when the family failed to appear by mid-morning, highly unusual for the normally punctual household, and especially concerning given that Josiah Moore was known for opening his business promptly every single morning without exception, went to check on them personally. She found the front door locked, every window shade drawn completely shut despite the daylight outside, and no response no matter how loudly or persistently she knocked. Growing increasingly alarmed, she contacted a relative of the family, who eventually made the decision to force entry into the home himself. What they found inside would haunt the town of Villisca for the rest of the century, and arguably to this day. Every member of the household, all 8 people, had been killed with an axe belonging to Josiah Moore himself, an axe normally used for farm work that had apparently been taken from an outdoor shed. The weapon was found leaning deliberately against a wall in an upstairs bedroom, seemingly left behind at the scene rather than taken by the killer when he departed. The attacks appeared to have occurred while every single victim was asleep, with medical examination finding no evidence that any of them had woken in time to react, resist, call out, or even shift position defensively before being struck. Investigators noted several deeply unsettling details about the crime scene that went far beyond the violence itself. Every mirror in the house had been carefully and deliberately covered with clothing taken from closets throughout the home. All the window blinds throughout the entire house had been pulled completely shut, seemingly by the killer himself, rather than being closed by the family before bed, as had been their usual habit, according to neighbors familiar with the household's routine. A plate of uneaten food had been left sitting on the kitchen table downstairs, untouched, as though the killer had paused at some point during or after the murders, perhaps to eat, or perhaps simply to sit in the quiet, dark house surrounded by the family he had just killed. A bloody bar of soap and a basin of bloody water were discovered in an upstairs bedroom, strongly suggesting the killer had taken the time to wash blood from his hands and body before ultimately leaving the scene, demonstrating a level of calm, deliberate behavior that unsettled investigators far more than a chaotic, frenzied crime scene might have. The bodies of the 4 Moore children and the 2 young Stillinger sisters showed broadly similar wound patterns to one another, consistent with the same weapon and similar force. However, investigators specifically noted that Sarah Moore's injuries were dramatically more severe than those of any other victim found in the house, with a significantly higher number of blows delivered specifically to her, far beyond what would have been necessary to end her life. This particular detail would go on to fuel decades of theories among investigators and historians about the killer's possible underlying motive, suggesting to many that Sarah Moore, rather than the family as a whole, may have been the primary intended target of the attack. Despite an intensive local investigation launched immediately after the discovery, forensic technology available in 1912 was extremely limited by modern standards. In the chaos and shock that followed such an unprecedented crime in a small, tight-knit community, dozens of visitors, including curious townspeople, relatives, and even newspaper journalists, were allowed to walk freely through the crime scene in the hours and days immediately following the discovery, well before the scene was properly secured or documented, destroying an enormous and irreplaceable amount of potential physical evidence in the process. Suspicion within the town quickly turned toward several possible individuals over the following months and years, though critically, no one was ever formally convicted for the crime, despite multiple serious investigations and even criminal trials. A traveling minister named Reverend George Kelly, who had reportedly attended the very same church service the Moore family attended earlier that evening before mysteriously leaving Villisca shortly afterward under unclear circumstances, became an early and persistent suspect in the case. He was formally arrested years later, stood trial twice, and at one point gave a confession to investigators, though he later recanted that confession entirely, claiming it had been coerced. His first trial ended without any conviction due to a deadlocked jury. In his second trial, he was ultimately found not guilty, and no further legal action was ever pursued against him for the remainder of his life. Another prominent suspect who emerged during the investigation was a sitting state senator named Frank Jones, who had a well-documented history of business rivalry and personal conflict with Josiah Moore dating back several years before the murders. Some townspeople and later historians have speculated that Jones may have arranged for someone else to carry out the murders on his behalf, though absolutely no physical evidence was ever discovered connecting him directly to the crime scene or to any hired perpetrator, and he was never formally charged with any involvement whatsoever. A drifter named William Mansfield was also investigated decades after the initial crime, due to his suspected connection to several other strikingly similar unsolved axe murders that occurred in different states across the American Midwest around the same general time period. However, this broader connection between Mansfield and the Villisca murders specifically has never been definitively proven through any conclusive evidence, and remains, like every other theory in this case, entirely speculative. Over a century later, forensic advances that might otherwise have finally resolved this case simply arrived far too late to matter. The physical evidence originally collected from the scene, badly contaminated by dozens of untrained visitors in the immediate aftermath of the discovery, was never properly preserved in any condition that could reasonably support modern DNA analysis or contemporary forensic review, even decades later when such technology finally became available. The house itself still stands today in Villisca, meticulously restored to its original 1912 appearance and furnishings, and now operates as a historic site that visitors from around the world can tour during the day, and even stay overnight in, for those specifically interested in experiencing the location firsthand after dark. Numerous visitors and self-described paranormal investigators over the decades since have reported various unexplained sounds, physical sensations, and personal experiences within the house, though none of these individual accounts have ever been independently verified or confirmed through any scientific or forensic method whatsoever. To this day, no individual has ever been definitively identified, formally charged, or successfully convicted for the murders of the Moore family and the Stillinger sisters. The case technically remains formally open with local Iowa authorities, officially unsolved, more than a century after that quiet June night when someone walked calmly into a sleeping household in a peaceful small town and left 8 people dead without ever waking a single neighbor on the quiet street outside. If this story disturbed you, imagine being a resident of that small town, going about your daily life for years, even decades afterward, knowing that whoever committed this crime may have simply continued living among you, at church, at the market, on the street, never identified, never caught, and never held accountable. If you want more real unsolved mysteries like this one, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. New stories are coming every week, and this case is far from the strangest one still to come.